We were eating dinner the other night, and first time out in 6 weeks, and every other table had caution tape on it, and the waiters were, all wearing masks. And I looked at my family and I said, if I would have showed you this picture 2 months ago, would you have believed me? I said, you would look forward to this. You wouldn't believe me. I'm Paul Joyner, the senior pastor at Zion Presbyterian Church. We're a 200-plus-year-old church that is historically rooted and culturally relevant. That's our goal, is to speak the unchangeable truths of God's word into today's world. Our 200-year history is a history of God's faithfulness that we want to see continued in the present generation and for generations to come. We also have a school. Part of our mission is to create disciples who leave a visible, lasting difference on the world so that it might flourish because of the presence of the kingdom of Jesus. I think my first thought was trying to frame this biblically so that we weren't swept around by Facebook and social media or the news outlets, but we're seeing it through the lens of God and His Word. It's not the first plague that's hit the world, and so the Bible has much to say for hope for God's people, hope for the world in the midst of a plague or pandemic, but also provide solid ground for our feet to be put on. So my first thought was we need to frame this by God's vantage point from His Word so that people both have hope and courage and wisdom to navigate these waters. And then we're going to have to change everything. Everything's got to change. We've got to be super flexible and nimble, which is not easy for a 200-year-old church with a lot of expectations. And so I think one of the things that's come out of this is that we are becoming much more nimble and letting mission drive our decision making. The mission of God. We often say that God doesn't have a mission for His church. He has a church for His mission. We want to make decisions based on mission, not people's expectations or fears or history or tradition. And that's one of the things I think that's come out of this pandemic, is it's really forced us to refine ourselves. What is essential? Who are we? What are we trying to do? What has God given us to do as His church in this world? And how do we do that effectively during a massive upheaval in the traditional ways of doing things or the normal ways of doing things? We've pivoted, like everyone else, to live streaming on Sunday mornings. So we are trying to keep worship as the central thing that we do as a church. And part of our understanding of how God works is that His mission is fueled, His kingdom is fueled by worship and towards the ends of worship in everyday life. And so corporate worship on Sunday mornings is the engine that drives God's people into mission. We've gone online with a lot of our Bible studies, as well as having to find new resources to get in front of people. Lots of communication, trying to communicate a lot more regularly, because we realize that people are separated from each other. And so we're trying to communicate a lot more regularly. So we're trying to create structures that allow us to hear each other and hear each other believing God's promises and hearing God's promises on each other's lips. Because we always say we're embodied souls, and the kingdom of God is supposed to be embodied. And one of the things that has been taken away is that embodied connection with each other. And so we don't think these are adequate substitutes in any ways, but they are something that we can do to try to replace little bits of what we've lost. I think that's been the biggest challenge, but also the constancy of change. It seems like every morning we have one plan, and by the afternoon we've changed it. And so the constancy of change is exhausting. I think we are made for habit, and habit brings some sense of peace and stability. And in the in the absence of any of regular habits, when everything is changing so constantly, it just raises anxiety and stress and so much my own heart and so many of the people that I talk to. I feel like I'm connecting with my people a lot more because I have a lot more time, and so I'm checking in on them a lot more through telephone, mostly phone calls. I try to connect 3 or 4 or 5 different new people every day. So I'm having a lot more raw conversations. A lot of the pretense seems to be gone. That's one of the things I think the constancy of stress and anxiety has stripped away a lot of pretense. And so we just start, when I ask the question, how are you doing? We are able to get much deeper, much more quickly, because everyone knows that no one's doing well. That's normal life. No one's doing well. We're all broken. Our lives are a mess, but we like to put on the facade that that's not true. That facade's been ripped off. And so I feel like I'm talking more frequently and much more in depth with our people.
So what do the next few months look like for you?
I have no idea. I have no idea. We're trying to restart worship right now. And that's been one of those things, a constantly evolving plan. And we thought at the earlier part of this week that we had a stable plan in place that we were trying to execute, and it's changing as the week goes on. And so we're trying to restart worship. And then beyond that, we have no idea. That may last for 6 months. It may last for a couple weeks. We have just no idea what's next or what the next few months look like for us. I would never have thought that this is what 2 months ago, this is what we'd be looking at. So we are holding everything loosely. That's part of I think that's part of the exhaustion for everybody, is you just don't know. There is no normal. There's no patterns to life. There's no looking forward and thinking this is coming. All plans have been wiped away, and even the ability to make plans seems to be wiped away too. Jesus is the only rock on which you can build your life, and the uncertainty that you feel right now is Him just stripping away all the false things that we've built our lives on. But the one thing that will never get stripped away is His victory over sin, Satan, and death, in the cross and in His resurrection and His reign and His return. And He is gracious to welcome any to fall on Him. And from wherever you are and whatever you've done, there's no person so good that they don't need Jesus, or so bad that they can't have Jesus. And so He'll take you and set your feet on the firm foundation of a risen and reigning King, who will forgive sins and give new life and promise a better future.